required, weighs 1.7, drink bottle 750 grams. So that only leaves 500 grams for lunch, sheet music, musical instruments, library books. And when my crew started school, we got them 10-litre bags thinking they shouldn't be carrying all that much. And we were asked to get them bigger bags because they couldn't fit everything they needed in. And what kids are expected to ferry to and from school is crazy, says Sarah. Now, that school's principal is Lindley Myers. Lindley is in charge of Royal Oak Primary School, which has a voluntary BYOD policy. Hello, Lindley. Hello, Lindley. Not quite. BYOD means bring your own device, which means, I presume, that the a voluntary policy means the children don't have to. But the point while we wait for Lindley, I'm not sure if we're going to get her or not, the point you were making about using lockers, Rabin, I mean, sometimes the lockers are on the other side of the school these days, so you just don't have access to them.
No, the point is I was thinking back to high school. I wasn't thinking about primary school or intermediate, like when I think about the lugging of things. So yeah, that is a difference, and it's the opposite of handy, isn't it? If you've got this 2-kilo laptop on top of everything.
Lindley, as we said, Lindley Myers is the principal of Royal Oak Primary. Hello, Lindley.
Hello, Jim.
Nice to talk to you. Do you, as a principal, worry about little ones under strain like this?
To be honest with you, I haven't really thought too much about it. Our little ones, of course, don't have BYOD devices, so it's our bigger children. We call them the Royal Oaks, the sort of the year 4 up, right, that have the BYOD. It's completely voluntary as to whether they have them or not, so it's not a compulsory part, but most of them do. What I do notice is that many of the parents have got little sort of satchels that the children carry in their hands, so they're not actually lugging them on their back.
Do they separate out, for example, the computer from the rest of the stuff in the backpack?
Yes, they do. Some of them do. I mean, I guess with the at primary school age, it's perhaps a little different because we're not lugging textbooks. We're not, in fact, with BYOD, we're not even necessarily taking books home because the work is done online.
Okay.
So generally what's in their backpack would be their lunch and their drink bottle and their device, if that's the way they choose to have it.
Okay, so aside from the device, this sounds like the traditional way of going to school and taking what you need. But in terms of the heavy loads, the much bigger loads, as a principal, I mean, this can't go on, can it, when professional health bodies start issuing warnings about damage to children with heavy backpacks?
Yeah, well, it can't go on. I mean, if I was to be alerted to the fact that the bags are heavier than they were, then obviously we would manage it differently. But at this point in time, most of the children carry them, as I say, like in a little satchel in their hand.
Lindley, thank you for joining us. Sorry we couldn't get to you right away. Lindley Myers from Royal Oak Primary School. Before we go, Barnaby Joyce in Australia, he's always in the news for so many reasons, running from Johnny Depp's dogs to his New Zealand citizenship. One of his missions as a politician was to defend the institution of marriage against the same-sex onslaught, which would degrade it. Now he's exited his own marriage after 24 years by pursuing a relationship with a much younger staff member, and the two of them are expecting a baby. Is it his business or ours? Panellists.
There's a hypocrisy test which cuts through politics, and I think this is pretty open and shut. If you have, gone on about the sanctity of marriage and in the way that he has, then behaved in a different way himself, then I think it's pretty open and shut. I mean, I do feel uncomfortable, particularly for the woman involved who's pregnant, but I think that, he's got to take his lumps, really.
You agree with that, Raymond?
Yeah, absolutely. I really, I just hate being preached at, and so politicians who do that, I think they really they deserve what's coming to them.
All right then. Last word to you, Raven. All the best with your tour, and you'll find many fascinating destinations.
Thank you very much.
If you can find them.
Looking forward to it.
Jane Clifton, always a pleasure to talk to you, Jane.
Thank you.
Thanks for your company, everybody. We're back tomorrow, as per usual, and Checkpoint with John Campbell coming right up.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, good afternoon. Ko Katrina Batten aho. The owners of a Filipino restaurant in Auckland have been sentenced for exploiting workers and giving misleading information to Immigration New Zealand. Luisito and Virgil Balahadia, who run Three Kings Food in Birkenhead, were found to have exploited 5 chefs they sponsored from the Philippines, Laura Tupou reports.
Labour inspectors found one of the chefs was underpaid about $22,000 over 15 months. He was driven to and from work by the owners and lived in a makeshift room in their garage, for which he was charged $150 a week. The man worked 6 days a week, and on Mondays, when the restaurant was closed, he cleaned the owner's house. Judge Dawson said the conditions weren't far removed from slavery. One of the owners was sentenced to 26 months in prison and the other to 8 months home detention. They were each ordered to pay just over $7,000 to the victim. The 4 other chefs have returned home to the Philippines. Ko Laura Tupou aho.
National MPs have put on a united front, lining up to back their leadership team at the party's annual retreat. The 2-day meeting in Tauranga comes after a burst of speculation last week, with reports some MPs were unhappy with the Deputy Leader, Paula Bennett. Here's our political reporter, Craig McCulloch.
Last week, RNZ reported some National MPs were unhappy, particularly with Mrs Bennett, and were considering their options in case Bill English stood down as leader. But today, MPs had nothing but praise. Simon Bridges and Jonathan Coleman, who've both put their names forward for leadership spots before, say they're 100% behind those at the top. They ruled themselves out of any leadership challenge, but wouldn't comment on what they'd do if Mr English retired. Bill English, meanwhile, says he's focused on the 2020 election and considers his position dependent on his performance. From Tauranga, Craig McCulloch.
The government of Kiribati has banned a New Zealand TV crew from reporting on the Busraoi ferry disaster. When they arrived on Kiribati on Monday, News Hub journalist Michael Morra and his camera operator had their passports taken off them. The next day, they were questioned by immigration officials, and Mr Morra was made to delete an interview he'd already conducted with survivors. The men were told that while the government is investigating, it didn't want foreign journalists interfering. The Australian Broadcasting Corporation has also been warned about reporting on the disaster by the Kiribati government. Just 7 people survived the disaster and more than 80 others are believed to have died. The Education Minister wants charter schools to negotiate an early end to their contracts with the government. Chris Hipkins says the 11 privately owned, publicly funded schools can apply to become a different type of school, and each will discuss its future with the Education Ministry. The Minister has introduced a bill to Parliament that stops the creation of new charter schools, but allows the existing schools to continue while their future is decided. He says his preference is early termination of the contracts. But Mr Hipkins says he reserves the right to shut the schools down by the end of this year if they do not reach an agreement with the government. The Qualifications Authority rushed to correct student records today after it was discovered markers failed to award grades for 265 digital exams last year. The error affected 258 students who were part of a trial for online exams. Our education correspondent John Gerritsen reports.
Students told RNZ News they were shocked and disappointed when they saw not achieved grades in their exam results. They say they're pleased the Qualifications Authority has put the error right and the experience has not put them off sitting digital exams. The principal of one of the schools involved, Mike Williams from Pakuranga College, says the error is a teething problem rather than a major failure. The authority says it apologises to the students and most should expect their results to be updated today. It says it's still on track for its goal of having all exams online by 2020. Ko John Gerritsen, TNA.
The Mayor of Queenstown says the government is considering introducing a bed tax in the town as it struggles to keep up with the tourist demand on its infrastructure. Jim Bolt met with the Deputy Prime Minister and other senior government ministers in Wellington last week to discuss how the town can pay for much-needed maintenance and infrastructure projects. Mr Bolt says the council prefers a bed tax, and if nothing is done, Queenstown will not be able to sustain its services to visitors. He expects an answer from the government within a couple of months.
There's not a set time frame, and you know how these things work. It'll work its way through the process. But look, it was a warm, engaging meeting. Ministers understood the issues we have, and we do have a bit of a burning bridge. So, you know, they're aware that it's not something that can just sit there festering for a year or more.
Queenstown Lakes Mayor Jim Bolt. It's 5 minutes past 5. Sport, and the Silver Ferns captain Katrina Grant admits change is needed to the New Zealand netball squad if they're to have a successful Commonwealth Games in April. The Northern Mystics defender Michaela Sokolic-Beatson is the sole new cap in the 12-strong squad for April's games on the Gold Coast, while shooter Amelia-Ann Ekanazio has been recalled. Phoenix Karaka, Whitney Souness, Jane Watson and Maya Wilson have all been dropped. Katrina Grant says given a series of losses to Australia and England, something had to give if New Zealand are to have any chance of winning gold at the Games.
Obviously that Northern Tour did not go the way we wanted it to go, and we've really come back needing to train hard and really look at ourselves and as a team, and I think these two additions coming in are great team people, and I think that makes a massive difference.
Katrina Grant. The cream of New Zealand sporting talent will gather in Auckland tonight to celebrate for the Halberg Awards. There are 16 finalists across sportsman, sportswoman, disabled sportsperson and team of the year categories. The Women's Rugby World Cup winning head coach Glenn Moore will continue his role with the Black Ferns for 2 more years. Moore has led the side to 15 wins and just 1 loss in 16 tests. That's the news.
The government made to pay up.
The Ministry of Health, their attitude is put your children in care, and my argument to that is as long as I'm able to look after him, I will.
But what's the price of power?
Power prices in New Zealand have risen 50% since 2000, and that New Zealand consumers are paying some of the highest rates.
The price is accountability.
We can't fix everything overnight. We don't have the skills, so sometimes you have to bite the bullet because you've got to get the job done.
Holding to account. Morning Report with Guy and Espiner and Susie Ferguson, weekdays from 6.
Then on 9 to noon, New Zealand spends millions of dollars a year promoting marine safety in the Pacific. Is it making any difference? And after 10, bringing Kiwi horror to the world stage with producer Whaling Au. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Service weather through to midnight tomorrow, Northland, Auckland and Coromandel Peninsula. Scattered rain becoming widespread in Northland this evening and spreading further south tonight and overnight with heavy falls. Waikatutu, Taranaki, including Bay of Plenty, the Central High Country, Gisborne and Hawke's Bay. Mostly fine today, however, a few showers about Gisborne and Hawke's Bay. Rain spreading south tomorrow morning and afternoon, with possible heavy falls easing towards evening. Whanganui to Wellington and Wairarapa, mostly cloudy for Wairarapa, otherwise mainly fine. Cloud increasing tomorrow with scattered rain developing late afternoon or evening. For Fiordland, fine at first, a few showers developing this evening. For the rest of the South Island, fine apart from areas of cloud morning and night, isolated afternoon and evening showers about the ranges. And for the Chatham Islands, cloudy periods with a chance of a light shower tomorrow. It is 8 minutes past 5.
Toti maira, e hoa mai, he kōrero kei te haere, he kaupapa kei te karawhiua. Welcome everyone to Checkpoint for Thursday the 8th of February. Tonight, the 4-day week. We called the company who were doing it and received a compelling business case in favour of it from the boss and a challenge to other employers. A fail grade for NCEA's online exams, the school with no pupils, the Nats meet in Tauranga where Winston Peters launched New Zealand first, of course, no similar revolution today, and 76-year-old Diane Moody, who the Court of Appeal ruled should receive more money to care for her severely disabled son. Hers is not an isolated case. Thanks for being with us on Checkpoint. Lots on the program tonight, and we are going to begin very quickly in Dunedin. Officers investigating the death of teenager Amber Rose Rush have found an item of interest in the Blackhead area of Dunedin. It's only a few kilometres from the 16-year-old's home in a nearby suburb where her body was found by her mother on Saturday morning. We go now live to our Otago Southern reporter Timothy Brown to hear more. Timothy, nice to have you with us. Thank you. What have police found?
Good afternoon, John. At the moment, police are not confirming what they have located, but there are reports out there that they were searching for the cell phone of Amber Rose, which was believed to be discarded in that area following her killing.
Right. And what other information have police released today?
What police have said today is that they're still calling for the sightings of what they believe to be a Toyota Camry, which was parked in the car park at Blackhead Quarry at that time, around about midnight on Friday evening and through to early morning Saturday. And they've also said that they're interested in sightings of a silver two-door BMW, which they believe travelled from Dunedin to Balclutha between midnight and 2 a.m. on Saturday morning.
Obviously, this is sub judice, Timothy, but how does this relate to the 30-year-old who appeared in court on Monday charged with the murder?
Well, police, again, are staying tight-lipped on all of this. They are pointing towards sub judice laws on what they release, saying only release what's in the public interest. But we have established that the man who appeared in court on Monday does own a silver BMW. Police have not confirmed whether it is the same one they're looking for sightings of. And the house in which he resided is about 5 kilometres from the quarry area, which is also only about 5 kilometres from Amber Rose's house. It's a triangle, basically, around those three sites.
Thanks, Timothy. Really appreciate it. Timothy Brown just joining us live there. So police have found an item of interest in the Blackhead area. Once we are able to tell you more, we will do so. That's just been announced by police a short time ago. We turn now, not for the first time on this program, to, well, another example of the stresses on the parents of children with serious disabilities. This time we are in the Wairarapa, which is northeast of Wellington. Their families with seriously disabled children are selling their homes, uprooting their lives and moving out so their children can get the education they say they simply can't access across that entire region. And it's not the only region in that position. And as Michelle Cook reports, the Associate Education Minister says that's not good enough and it is time for change.
No primary school in the Wairarapa wants to establish a special needs school or satellite unit, and the Ministry of Education can't impose one. As a result, families with disabled children are moving out of the area to get their children into special schools, as they fear mainstream schools can't cater to their children's specialised needs. One of them is a Barnes family who are in the process of selling their home in Carterton to move to Lower Hutt for their 5-year-old daughter Erin's education. Erin has Prader-Willi syndrome but has been investigated for other genetic syndromes. She can't talk, chew or swallow, can't hold a pen and has seizures.
There is only the choice of mainstreaming if we stay here. She moves the whole time. She's quite disruptive in the fact that she will wander around children and touch them the whole time. She climbs on adults. She licks everything. So although she wouldn't be standing on a table screaming and shouting and causing a disruption that way, she would disrupt the class in many, many other ways. So she needs a lot of support the entire time.
That's Emily Barnes, Erin's mum, who this week has begun a daily 138-kilometre round trip to drive her daughter from Carterton to Kimiora School, a special school in Lower Hutt, while they wait for their home to sell. It's the closest special school to them.
It's very, very specialised. I don't think that every teacher, this is no disrespect to teachers at all, I don't think that every teacher in a class with 30 other children has the time to deliver such a specialist expert program to one child without there being a knock-on effect on the other 29 children.
They have appealed to the Ministry of Education for a specialist school or unit in the area, a plea they say is supported by 44 other local parents, but felt they had no choice but to leave after receiving a letter from the Ministry on behalf of Minister Chris Hipkins. That letter, which Checkpoint has seen, says no school in the Wairarapa wants to establish a special needs unit, the Ministry cannot impose one, and there are no plans to build or provide one.
It comes across as nobody wants to help these children. It is upsetting to see that 25 schools in the area don't want to help our children with special needs. And we're not talking about all children with special needs, we're talking about the ones with more complex special needs that just don't thrive in a mainstream environment. And I was really disappointed in the schools, but also disbelief and shock that their hands are tied.
Sue Walters is the principal of Masterton Primary, part of the Masterton Primary Principals Cluster. She says no school in the area wants to establish a special needs school or unit because children are accommodated within mainstream schools.
I've seen kids that people believed were basically and educable turn around and achieve stuff that your so-called normal children can't do.
She said she couldn't speak for other schools in the area, but her staff had the talents and support to ensure children with special needs thrive. But Associate Minister for Education, Tracy Martin, says parents are the ones that truly know what's best for their children, and it's time the system started listening to them.
I'm not trying to take away from the educational professionals at all, but these young people have physical needs, educational needs, social needs, and so for the education system to just say to the parents about their children, actually, we know best, so we're not going to discuss it, we're not going to look at options. I think that's very disappointing. I think we'd like to move past that. We'd like to start working more closely with the parents and looking at why don't these parents have the similar choices for their children as all other children have.
Tracy Martin says the Wairarapa might not need its own special school, but a satellite unit could be beneficial. But principals might be concerned it wouldn't be properly funded.
We would love some more money.
That's Principal Sue Walters again. Her school often has to dip into operational funds to top up teacher aid hours, as most children who meet OR's ongoing resourcing scheme criteria only receive 10 to 17 hours a week.
It would just be so good to be able to have these kids, fully covered and fully catered for. If they need to be covered, it doesn't stop at lunchtime, or it just doesn't stop at 1 o'clock when the money runs out. They have to be covered. And the problem is that other kids can be seen to be missing out. No, I can't afford all the technology that I would like at my school because I'm actually spending it on some of these sorts of things.
Disability Rights Commissioner Paula Tesoriero agrees with Sue Walters that work is needed to ensure all special needs children are able to access an inclusive education at their local school, rather than having to attend a special school or unit. She says many children at the moment are not receiving the education they need.
I agree that is the reality for too many disabled kids in New Zealand, and, looking at the stats, in terms of outcomes, speaks to that. I think there are a range of reasons and things that need to change. I'll be continuing to advocate for this as part of the government's 30-year vision on education, that inclusive education for disabled kids is there, and we really address this properly once and for all.
The ministry says Marlborough, West Coast, Motueka, Golden Bay and Gisborne are other areas without a special school or satellite class. It is continuing discussions with Wairarapa principals on what supports are needed. For Checkpoint, Michelle Cook.
Now, a couple of points off the back of Michelle's story. One, we would love to hear from parents outside the Wairarapa who are having similar experiences. Please get in touch. Possibly best to email us, checkpoint@radionz.co.nz, but you can text 2101. And in the Wairarapa, we are back later in the program at the school with no pupils. 5:18 on Checkpoint. For many people, this is a 4-day week. It was Waitangi Day on Tuesday, of course. For the staff of Perpetual Guardian, every week is about to be. It's a trial, but the head of the nationwide company believes it will work. Perpetual Guardian writes and manages wills, trusts, estates, that kind of work. And its workforce has largely observed a good old-fashioned Monday to Friday, 9 to 5 kind of arrangement. But the more Andrew Barnes thought about it, the more he thought his staff could achieve the same productivity in 32 hours that they do in 40. So he asked the staff if they'd like to give it a go. And the answer was a resounding yes.
So what we're doing is a trial of a 4-day week.
That's Andrew Barnes, the boss, who became fascinated by productivity.
I read a couple of articles and a couple of reports. One came out of Canada and one came out of the United Kingdom.
And they looked at how much work people actually do at work.
And the productivity levels were actually awful. I mean, they were a matter of a couple of hours a day of truly productive work in a 7-hour workday. And that sort of started to me thinking about, well, how do you deal with that?
And he kept thinking about it and thinking about it.
And so I started to think, well, actually, is there a trade-off here? If I can free up more time for the staff, would I actually get better productivity? And I decided that if I said to the staff, well, guys, this is up to you now. Do you want this? If you want this, you've got to show me how it works.
The details are important. Life is expensive. People work for all sorts of reasons, of course, but foremost amongst them is to pay the bills. So there's not a pro rata salary reduction. People will earn this. Okay, so they'll earn the same money.
Yeah, I'm interested in productivity, and I think this is, from a corporate point of view, that's the key thing that you're looking at. You want to make sure that productivity holds up. Now, it's my belief that if I have staff who are motivated, staff who can actually do the things that they need to do to be, a good parent or a good member of the community outside the company, then I'm actually going to get higher levels of engagement when they're working.
So to clarify, the 4 days won't be longer. They really are dropping a day.
It's about being paid for 5 days, but only working for 4.
Now, I spoke to Andrew Barnes on his cell phone and he was at work, so I asked him to pass his phone to staff members nearby.
Hello, Kirsten speaking.
Kirsten, John Campbell from Radio New Zealand. How are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Good. So what do you do there?
I'm the philanthropy manager.
And so you will have a 4-day week?
I will.
And what do you think about that?
After I picked my jaw up off the floor, I thought that was really pretty special.
And you're going to keep earning the same money?
Yes.
And there is no quid pro quo for this. If you are able to do the same work that you previously did in 4 days, that's it. That's all it's required.
Exactly. And as a solo mum, I'm pretty efficient with my time. I have to be. And so I'm really confident that I can deliver 4 days' work that will cover all that's required.
And around the office the phone went, from Kirsten to Samita.
I'm very well, thank you.
What's your job?
I am in a relationship management role with our investment team.
From Samita to Richard. What's your job?
I'm the head of legal for personal client services.
And so you would have worked a very structured 5-day week, right? Old school kind of working.
Oh, yes, very much. And in law firms prior to this, so it's very much that.
Richard is 59 and hadn't ever expected to find himself part of such a workplace experiment. So does a man who's been in the workforce for decades have a view on how this will go?
Oh, very, very much so. And I think productivity will, if anything, increase because you'll have that extra day off. You'll be more energised and able to perform instead of getting that stale sort of 5-day churn. You'll be more focused on the 4 days you're there.
Samita feels the same way, and she and her immediate colleagues are now planning the architecture of a 4-day week.
And currently, our team, we are thinking about, how best we can ensure that the client, our company is very client focused, so we are working out ways where it doesn't impact our clients at all.
And here's what Samita's noticed so far.
I think it's bringing our whole team together now.
And as for the extra day at home or wherever they want to spend it, well, remember Kirsten, who balances her paid work with her life as a solo mum with a 2-year-old boy. So you're going to get 3 days a week full-time with him.
Yes, exactly. And to be meaningfully more a part of his upbringing and also be able to give back in the philanthropy side of my work and, honour the intentions of these incredible individuals who have left money in our care to pay to charitable purpose. I feel very, very lucky.
It's really lovely to talk to you, Kirsten. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
And I need to ask you this. You're not saying all this stuff because the boss is standing beside you, right?
Not at all.
This is heartfelt. Okay.
It is. I just about cried when it was announced. I just completely dumbfounded. Yeah, what a magic opportunity.
That's good, says Andrew Barnes, and that's what he wants. But he's not sentimental in his approach. The work still has to be done. It's just that he thinks it will be. And he hopes other employers watch to see what happens closely.
And so what this is about is actually starting that conversation in a small way within our company, but then looking to share the results of it with the broader community here in New Zealand. And we've offered to give the results to any company that's interested. We're engaging with the universities about seeing if they want to run a case study on it. Because I think if you can get the same productivity out of a more flexible work week, that's something that benefits us all.
Andrew Barnes, who is the head of Perpetual Guardian, we would of course love your feedback on this. 5:25, an elderly mother is delighted after the Court of Appeal rules she should receive more money to care for her severely disabled son. The court has ordered the Ministry of Health pay 76-year-old Diane Moody for a 40-hour working week, considerably more than the 17 she is currently paid for. Her 51-year-old son Shane has Williams syndrome, is partly paralysed and has a severe intellectual disability. But as Eric Frickberg reports, Diane's is not an isolated case.
Gillian Wright is a 62-year-old Mount Albert widow with a 29-year-old son with autism and other conditions. She also has a 26-year-old son with intellectual disabilities. Although the pair get 6 hours of care in a special centre during the day and some home help 2 nights a week, the burden of looking after them is still intense.
Both boys are like young toddlers, really. They've got no sense of danger or anything, and they're both in nappies, and they need me to shower them and dress them. They can't do any of that themselves, so it's kind of a full-time role.
Gillian Wright is one of an estimated 1,600 families who care for their handicapped children long after they've reached adulthood and even middle age. Their predicament has been highlighted by Diane Moody's case in the Court of Appeal, where she objected to getting just 17 hours of payment a week at the minimum wage for the full-time job of caring for her severely disabled 51-year-old son. Beside the help for her sons, Ms. Wright gets a special payment of $265 a week, and she's not asking for any more money. The trouble is, getting even that help is a mammoth task.
You have to go through a needs assessor contracted to the Ministry of Health. So you've got Ministry of Health, Ministry of Social Development, and if your child's still at school, you've got the Ministry of Education in the picture as well. So it's just a total complication and very hard to work out.
Diane Moody was the plaintiff at the Court of Appeal. For the past 5 decades, she's been the full-time caregiver for her son Shane, who suffers from a severe intellectual disability and is partially paralysed.
For 51 years, it's always been a battle with the Taikura Trusts and the Ministry of Health. They simply just don't understand.
Jan Moss of Takapuna is in a similar situation. She runs a group called Complex Caring and also looks after her 34-year-old daughter. She has an epileptic condition called Lennox-Gastaut syndrome, which has left her severely disabled. Unlike Diane Moody, she wants to find a professional carer for her daughter, but she can't find one.
It's been a really long, hard slog, and I think that's really the issue. People at the Ministry of Health and those making all these decisions have absolutely no idea what our reality is. And I guess I'd like to challenge them to come and spend a few days with us just to actually see. I'll be 70 in July, and I've done 34 years of really intensive caring, and it's taken its toll.
Prior to 2013, the Ministry of Health hadn't paid family members as caregivers, but several judicial rulings found this breached the Bill of Rights Act by discriminating against them. The previous National-led government then passed legislation allowing some payments, but under strict criteria. The Ministry of Health is still considering Diane Moody's judgment and has refused to comment. For Checkpoint, Eric Frickberg.
National MPs have spent the day hunkered down at their annual retreat, and for the first time ever the parties also invited the candidates next in line to enter Parliament. The 2-day meeting in Tauranga comes after a burst of leadership speculation last week, centred mainly around the performance of Deputy Paula Bennett. Our political reporter Craig McCulloch is in Tauranga.
This year's retreat at a waterfront hotel is a chance for National, still smarting from being ousted from government, to refocus and rejuvenate. For the first time, National's invited its so-called reserve bench, the candidates who will come into Parliament if any list MP leaves. So is the leader, Bill English, expecting a small post-election exodus?
Oh, look, we're early in the term of opposition. It's possible, but we always work on making sure that the team understands what's going on, so that whatever happens, we've got people who are ready, willing, and able.
The candidates spotted in attendance include former Westland Mayor Maureen Pugh, former Wellington Central candidate Nicola Willis, Agnes Lohini and Paulo Garcia. all eager and on their best behaviour.
If I do get into Parliament, that'll be a wonderful opportunity.
I think it's a really good initiative to have some of the listed candidates here so that if we get a call, we're ready to go.
Hopefully one day I look forward to joining the team.
But for that to happen this term, others would have to go. Some have speculated that senior list MPs, like Stephen Joyce or Chris Finlayson, may throw in the towel. But they say, not so.
No. I am very happy doing what I'm doing. I am here for the sake of my party.
Bill English was also asked whether he'd considered standing aside.
Well, I think everyone, after they lose an election has to think about it. But look, we're busy here focused on the 2020 election.
But will the two-time national leader still be the one in charge then?
Well, as I've always said, that's dependent on performance.
His fellow MPs say they want him to stay. Last week, reports surfaced some were unhappy, particularly with the Deputy Paula Bennett, but also that they were considering their options in case Mr English stood down. Today, nothing but praise.
I've got huge confidence in both Bill and Paula. We're energised, we're excited. Bill's had a great mandate from the public. He's doing very well as the leader, and people are right behind him.
The MPs are off to a dinner tonight and will reconvene tomorrow morning. From Tauranga for Checkpoint, Craig McCulloch.
Thank you for being with us on Checkpoint. Coming up on the program, Lewis Road Creamery recalls its breakfast drinks after it was revealed they contain 3 times more sugar than the labels stated. Wellington residents cry foul. It plans to provide 30 more car parks for Freedom campers on the capital's waterfront. We sent our reporter Zach Fleming to pest-free Rangitoto Island to pursue 2 reported sightings of black cat, and we do go to the school with no pupils. We'd love your feedback. You can text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. We're on Facebook, of course, or you can email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. Nona back with business news next. But at 28 minutes to 6, here's Katrina with the headlines.
Dunedin police have found an item of interest in Blackhead, about 5 kilometres from Corstorphine, where the body of 16-year-old Amber Rose Rush was found on Saturday morning. There are reports it's the teenager's cell phone. The owners of a Filipino restaurant in Auckland have been sentenced for exploiting workers and giving misleading information to Immigration New Zealand. Luisito and Virgil Balahadia, who run 3 Kings Food in Birkenhead, were found to have exploited 5 chefs they sponsored from the Philippines. The government of Kiribati has banned a New Zealand TV crew from reporting on the Busraoi ferry disaster. News Hub journalist Michael Morra and his camera operator had their passports taken from them when they arrived on Monday. The next day they were questioned by immigration officials and made to delete an interview conducted with survivors. The government wants an early end to charter school contracts and could shut down the privately owned, publicly funded schools by the end of the year. The Education Minister, Chris Hipkins, says the Education Ministry will negotiate with each of the 11 schools on a case-by-case basis. An official estimate obtained by the National Party suggests just half of the 16,000 affordable homes the government's planning to build over the next 3 years will be constructed. The government wants to build 100,000 affordable homes over the next 10 years, and the Housing Minister, Phil Twyford, says 16,000 will be built in the government's first term. But an estimate by the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment has just 8,000 likely to be built over this time. National MPs have had nothing but praise for their leadership team at the party's annual retreat. At the 2-day meeting in Tauranga, Simon Bridges and Jonathan Coleman, who've both put their names forward for leadership spots before, say they're 100% behind those at the top. Those are the headlines. I'm back at 6 o'clock.
100%, Katrina Batten.
100.
Thank you very much indeed. Lots of feedback coming in. Thank you, everyone, and we will bring you some of it. But people really responding to the support or lack of it for the parents of severely disabled children in some parts of the country, and also people talking about a 4-day week. Nona Peltier.
Well, I don't have a 4-day week.
Every time it's in the Radio 1, you're on it.
This week was a 4-day week.
Yeah, that's because you're having your teeth. Oh, yeah, okay. Now. Well, I was going to talk about your teeth. You've had your teeth.
Yeah, but I'm good with that. No.
Yeah, good.
No.
Fletcher Building. This is a big story, isn't it? Because they've been placed in a trading halt, right?
That's right.
Yet another warning: big losses in the construction division.
Yeah. So last October we heard about this financial year, 160 million. That's on top of the couple $100 million from the year before. And it's involving these two projects we've talked about, one in the Justice Precinct in Christchurch and then the International Convention Centre for Sky City up here in Auckland. And so for those two projects, the company's been running into cost overruns. They've said that those costs would be ongoing, and in October they said 160 million more this year. Now they're saying, well, it's going to cost them even more than that. They haven't said how much. But they've said that the expectation is that it's going to put them into a breach of their covenant with the bank. So that's their financial arrangements.
Gosh.
And that's quite serious. And so that means that the company's going to have to come up with some kind of a plan to address that, whether that's a capital raising, maybe a sale of assets, some kind of restructuring. And then, of course, they're going to have to answer to the investors, too. Like, come on, how are you going to return to a profitable construction division? What's the plan? So this is an opportunity for Fletcher to get it right, but it's also going to be difficult.
Yeah, it is. It's such a fascinating story, Fletcher Building, isn't it? Because
really.
They seemed on the face of it to have picked up so much work in Christchurch.
Yeah.
That the revenue situation must have been extraordinary, but just.
Well, we've seen this across the sector, though. You know, the construction industry, you would have thought at boom times they would be doing great, but the costs have also scaled up, and their project costs, I guess, are fixed. I'm not exactly sure what the arrangements are. There's limited of how much disclosure there's been, but overall, you have to kind of think that the costs have really run away, and this labour shortage that we have is certainly not helping them.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Stay tuned. Thanks, Nona. The Reserve Bank has held the official cash rate at 1.75%. There are the undescribed species on distant planets. Who knew this was going to happen, right?
Well, that was not a surprise, but they were a little bit more dovish, which means that they were, less sort of enthusiastic about interest rate rises, and they were so far in the distance, like 2020 we're talking about now, that they're just not on the horizon. And that's partly because in the short term, the Reserve Bank is thinking that economic growth won't be quite as strong as we thought, so maybe 3.3% instead of 3.5%. But later on, we're expecting economic growth to pick up. And even though there are inflation pressures externally, that's internationally, and there are, believe me.
What happened on Wall Street, and it was a response to interest rate rises in the US off the back of inflation pressures, right?
However, the bank still doesn't think that those are significant enough to move on interest rates. And so for now, you can expect really no change. Well, unless there's something really extraordinary that happens overseas. And I think we've seen quite a few extraordinary things so far, so I don't know about that. We're probably not going to see any change there for 2020. Never mind, though, the dollar did fall a little bit, just slightly, 71.9 US cents, and that's partly, again, because the US dollar is stronger. 92 Australian and 51.8 pence. The top 50 index, now that's interesting, it fell nearly 0.2%. That's not a big fall. We're talking 18 points, that's 1.8, to 8,177. So we've seen a recovery there too. But look, there's a lot of volatility out there. We're seeing it right through Asia. We'll expect to see more in Europe and, of course, Wall Street. So
yeah, we were talking about that last night. It's going to be a volatile period ahead. Everyone is picking. Thanks, Nona. Lovely to have you back. Let's go to the weather now with Met Service meteorologist John Law. Kia ora, John.
Kia ora. It is looking like a rather wet weekend for us, with severe weather warnings already in place for Northland and a watch across towards Auckland as well, and that return of that humid air as well. Top temperatures around about 24 degrees Celsius in Auckland, but those overnight lows of only 20 or so. That rain spreads across the North Island as we go through daytime. Some heavier falls through Northland across towards the Coromandel, but it's also that humid air that returns towards us. We are going to find that it's very warm over the next few days, particularly through those nights. One of the drier spots will be down towards Wellington on the North Island, just a bit of that cloud thickening up and that rain arriving as we head through in towards the night time. But even on the eastern coast, we'll find rain spreading southwards through the daytime, albeit in a much more patchy affair, and now return of that very warm, very humid air as we go through in towards the weekend. For the South Island, though, it's a different story. High pressure stays with us. We'll find plenty of dry weather. A bit of patchy cloud and more cloud return towards the eastern coast for Christchurch and Canterbury in the afternoon. But generally, it's a dry day on the South Island. Plenty of sunshine. Temperatures are back up to around about 24 degrees Celsius for Queenstown. And we are going to find that warm, humid air sinking southwards along with the rain in time for the weekend. That's it from me.
Thanks so much, John. There's some heavy rain ahead. Do keep an eye on that if you were going somewhere Well, you need to be safe and dry. Health experts want better labelling on products after boutique dairy company Lewis Road Creamery's breakfast drinks were found to have 3 times more sugar than their label stated. 3 times more. Lewis Road has since recalled the drinks, which hit the supermarket shelves about a week ago. Our reporter Jessie Chang has more.
The new breakfast drinks have about 9 grams of sugar per 100 millilitres, 3 times as much as the 3 grams stated on the label. Lewis Road Creamery says it discovered the mistake 2 days ago. Consumers on the streets of Auckland were divided on whether the company should have been more accurate.
Because of New Zealand's high standards, I expect them to get it right.
I think that brands these days, are going to try and sell products the best they can and label things appropriately. And the breakfast market is quite a difficult market to break into and say that something's healthy, going to energise you for the whole day. I think by not labelling it correctly, they more did themselves a disfavour in this instance. But I wouldn't deny that a lot of other breakfast drinks have, incorrect labels as well.
Mistakes happen, and the great thing about what they've done is they've actually just been honest about it and said, you know what, we've made a mistake, we're recording the product and we're telling people why.
Lewis Road Creamery founder Peter Cullinane says he's very sorry for the genuine error, and the company has voluntarily removed the products from the shelves.
We're doing more testing, and we're also, making sure we cross every I and dot every T. So that the label is as accurate as it can possibly be. As it should have been to begin with, by the way, and so that was, our mistake.
Peter Cullinane says the labels only had information about added sugars and didn't account for the sugar that naturally occurs in milk.
Our whole focus on this has been to produce a dairy-based breakfast drink with minimum added sugar, and so all our attention has been, on this minimum added sugar. And I think in our zealousness to do that, we overlook the fact that there is naturally occurring sugars, as there are in, fruit and vegetables.
But a professor of population nutrition and global health, Boyd Swinburne from Auckland University, says manufacturers need to improve the labelling.
Well, we do rely on manufacturers to be accurate and correct in the labelling of their products in terms of ingredients and nutrient content. We don't want our food supply to be full of products that have inaccurate information.
Boyd Swinburne says it's a rookie mistake by Lewis Road Creamery, but it's good they're taking responsibility. The Dental Association says it's not surprised by the mislabelling, and it says labelling of sugar in general needs to improve. Its spokesperson Rob Beaglehole says current calculations are confusing for consumers.
I think ideally Lewis Road Creamery or any other companies should take it upon themselves to accurately highlight how many teaspoons of sugar are in their beverages. People do not understand grams, but people understand teaspoons.
The Dental Association is lobbying for a labelling symbol, which tells consumers how many teaspoons of sugar a drink contains. Lewis Road Creamery says it will be a couple of weeks before the breakfast drinks are back in supermarkets, and it's confident its other products are all labelled correctly. For Checkpoint, call Jessie Chang Aho.
Let's go across the Tasman, where a political story has turned very personal. It's the personal life of Australia's Deputy Prime Minister Barnaby Joyce, and it's been splashed across the front pages of the nation's newspapers, sparking recriminations and a privacy row. On yesterday's Sydney Daily Telegraph front page was the revelation that Mr Joyce is expecting a baby with his new partner, his former press secretary, who is 20 years his junior. The story has left a bitter taste in the mouth of his wife Natalie, of course, who he separated from last year, along with several politicians and voters in his electorate. Mr Joyce has been a big promoter of family values. He said his marriage breakdown is not unique, but is deeply regrettable. Here's the ABC's Andrew Probyn.
It was in defence of a traditional institution during the same-sex marriage debate 2 months ago that Barnaby Joyce shared some personal news.
The current definition of marriage, which has stood the test of time, whether it's, and half of them fail, I acknowledge that. Obviously, I acknowledge that I'm currently separated, so that's on the record.
Marriage was, he said,
a special relationship between a man and a woman, predominantly for the purpose, if you're so lucky, as to bring children into the world, if you're so lucky.
Perhaps unlucky is to have your luck splashed on the front page.
Personal lives are personal lives.
Private lives and personal matters should remain private.
Family matters should remain private.
Labor also opts for discretion.
My criticisms of him are of his job. And frankly, his personal situation
is none of my business.
Mr Joyce's separation from his wife Natalie and his relationship with his staffer Vicky Campion have been well known in Canberra for months and were never far from the surface during Mr Joyce's by-election fight last year. A whispering campaign with innuendo and rumours fanned by his one-time arch-nemesis Tony Windsor on social media. It's difficult to tell whether voters would have acted differently in light of the revelation.
I don't think it's good for the assistant PM to find himself in that situation.
He needs to have certain standards, he needs to uphold those, and being part of this community as well, keeping that quiet from the community is not really something that would go down well.
A lot of respect lost.
I think everyone in the area should know if these things are happening.
Scuttlebutt swirls with such abandon that separating fact from fiction can be tricky. But even when facts are established, there's the question of what's in the public interest. Is it a crime? Have any rules been broken? Has there been any misuse of taxpayers' money? If not, shouldn't it remain private? Especially when you're dealing with a devastated family.
Naturally, we feel deceived and hurt by the actions of Barnaby and the staff member involved.
His wife Natalie says in a statement, adding that she and their daughters shared their lives with politics.
And it was with trust that we let campaign and office staff into our homes and into our lives.
And that was a statement from Natalie Joyce ending that report from the ABC. It is 14 minutes to 6 right now. A fail grade for NCEA's online exams. Students have been left shocked and disappointed by the marking error that left them with fail grades in the online exams. The Qualifications Authority says its markers mistakenly assigned no marks to 265 digital exam scripts because of a problem with the design of the computer interface used by its markers. The intro alone was confusing, but to explain it all, here's our education correspondent John Gerritsen.
The Qualifications Authority says 258 students who sat last year's digital exams were hit by the problem. Auckland student Nancy, who was sitting NCEA Level 1 exams, was among them.
Well, when I first saw that the results were out and I saw the little red line on my pie chart, I was a bit shocked and a bit gutted because I thought I did all right on my exams. I saw that was for English, and at first I was kind of confused as to why it was A not achieved when I spent a long time on that paper. So yeah, I was pretty disappointed.
Another student, Cindy, says she was angry and disappointed to find a not achieved grade among her marks.
I was so shocked because I had spent so much time with my teachers and her teaching me how to get the M's and the E's for that particular standard. So I was really surprised as to how badly I had done, and I immediately thought about sending it back.
The Qualifications Authority is now marking the students' papers, and the error has not put the girls off sitting online exams again.
I'd rather do the digital exam because I think it's faster, and in this developing world, everyone's using their devices for pretty much everything.
The pros outweigh the cons, and it's always good to have a trial, and I feel like NCQA can learn from this, and it shouldn't be a problem in the future.
Pakuranga College in Auckland was one of the schools affected by the problem. Its principal, Mike Williams, says the error did not cause any students to miss out on their NCEA certificate, but it was an unwelcome surprise for those affected.
It wasn't catastrophic disasters, so at worst it would have been enough to tip them on to not achieving that standard, but that was just one standard in the mix of all the standards they were doing, so it didn't really affect anyone's progress through to the next level they're going to. It was more around, oh, I thought I did better than that.
Mike Williams says teachers quickly realised there was a systemic problem and were preparing to notify the Qualifications Authority. He says the error is a teething problem rather than a major failure.
I've got a lot of confidence in the process they've put in place, moving through the trials and the pilot. The whole point of those systems is to stress test it, to try and break it if you like, to work out how to make it work robustly when we move on to the next level.
The Qualifications Authority says it apologises to the affected students and most should expect their results to be updated today. It says it's still on track to have all exams online by 2020 and will run further digital exam trials this year. For Checkpoint, John Gerritsen, TNA.
It's 11 minutes to 6. We're getting a lot of feedback tonight on a couple of issues. First of all, support, or the lack of it, for students with special needs in the education system in some parts of the country. We really appreciate all the people who are contacting us, some of them parents, some of them people who work in the sector. This from Motueka. I work in special education and secondary school in Motueka. In my experience, there is never enough funding to cover the high physical or academic needs of the students. The expectations are high, but yeah, the budget is low. And that's in secondary school. I work as a teacher aide at a rural Canterbury school. Our school has 4 OAs funded students, but sadly often their funding gets cut as they age. Getting older doesn't mean these students need less help. In fact, sometimes they need more. Our school tops up the government funding, so us teacher aides can spend more time with our students, but it's never enough. And we often give our time for free simply because it's hard to walk away from a child who needs help just because the money has run out. Thank you, those of you who are getting in touch, and parents who are getting in touch. We will get back in touch with you. Residents sick of seeing toilets being emptied into Wellington's harbour don't want more space made available to Freedom campers on the capital's waterfront. New Plymouth and Queenstown have recently clamped down on Freedom campers, but in Wellington the City Council wants to make an extra 30 spaces available in the car park at Evans Bay Marina near the city centre, around a bit of a dogleg corner. Katie Scotcher reports.
Sarah Boddy is one resident who doesn't support the proposal. She says there are already problems with rubbish, people overstaying and campers pouring the contents of their toilet into the ocean.
Sadly for me, I have had the joy of seeing someone take their potty from their camper van and empty it into the sea. It's not on. What makes me really sad is one of the residents who is directly over the road. That was their view, that's what they looked at. They sold up. They went, you know what? No.
Ms Boddy was among the small but vocal group of residents opposed to the plan to increase the number of Freedom camping spots in Evans Bay to 76. The overwhelming majority of the more than 60 residents who submitted to the Wellington City Council supported the extension, but at the council meeting this morning, that support was not evident. Mike Woods has lived in Evans Bay for 20 years.
You guys have got land around Wellington that you could actually utilise to make a really good facility for these Freedom campers. And I've got no problem with it, but the problem is it is in our backyard and the users of that backyard can't use it anymore. And that's not fair.
Eastern Ward Councillor Simon Marsh says some campers have let themselves down.
By having the washing out, going to the toilet, cleaning their teeth. I mean, this is Wellington space. This is the residents' space. And when visitors come to your space, you expect them to treat it with some respect. And it looks as though we're going to have to police that if those Freedom campers are going to be using that space in the future.
Mr Marsh says they need to look harder for another space to allow camping. But the Motor Caravan Association says it's the right location and the expansion will help meet demand.
In addition to relying on the bylaw provisions to help govern the use of the site, we believe clear signage, disseminating consistent information to visitors through the likes of NZMCA, Rankers and Campermate, and a robust enforcement/educational regime will go a long way to minimising any perceived adverse effects.
Councillors will continue consulting for a few more weeks, and a decision isn't expected for months. In Wellington for Checkpoint, Katie Scotcher.
7.5 minutes to 6. More feedback coming in. This from Robin. In the past year, I've met a number of young adults with disabilities. I'm so shocked that these young people have just been put on a standard invalids benefit after they left high school with nothing put in place to enrich their lives. One young woman with cerebral palsy, when I asked why are you not at some form of tertiary education, she replied, people look at my body and think my brain is the same. I think this is a shameful situation. These young people need to be given a voice about their future. Thank you. Lots of people contacting us on that tonight, and lots of people contacting us on the 4-day week. One of the areas of confusion is that the 4-day week doesn't mean that the 40 hours that people previously worked are put into 4 10-hour days. In fact, they're just dropping a day. They're going down to 32 hours, so 4 8-hour days. So people saying 10-hour days hard yakka. Well, these people won't be doing it if they are efficient enough in their 4 days. Someone pointing out tradies have to work 5. Of course they do. Self-employed people will have to work 5. This is very much an arrangement that will suit offices where there are enough people to cover the 5 days between them whilst only working 4. But lots and lots of people are in favour of it. Thank you all for getting in touch. You can text us 2101 checkpoint at radionz.co.nz is, of course, the email address at checkpointrnz. And a reminder, we are on Facebook, Freeview Channel 50, Sky 83, which is Face TV, if you want to watch us and our flash new graphics. The Department of Conservation took speciality cat tracking dogs to Auckland's. My dog fancies himself as a speciality a cat tracker, to Auckland's Rangitoto Island today in a desperate attempt to keep it pest-free. There haven't been any cats, rats, possums or mice on Rangitoto since 2011, but 2 sightings of a black cat have been reported recently, one on the volcanic cone and one on the neighbouring Motatapu Islands. We asked Doc if we could go along with their search this morning, a great chance to see them do what they do best, but their communications team said no for reasons that we don't understand. But we couldn't just sit back while native species on the island are at risk, so we sent Zach Fleming and cameraman Nick Munro to help Doc, even though they didn't want it, find the cat. Hey, kitty, 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 kitty. Hey, kitty, kitty, kitty.
Rangitoto is in danger. Gareth Morgan wouldn't just sit by and do nothing, so why should we? Armed with catnip, treats, a toy and a bell, we rushed to Rangitoto on the ferry.
Now the island we're taking you to, folks, is pest-free.
We wanted to go and see the little blue penguins, but it was cancelled, so this is the last option.
Can you try and find the cat for us?
I'll have a look at the pussy over there, yeah.
If you see the cat, what are you going to do?
I'm going to be disappointed about it. I mean, I could try and grab it, but I don't think I will.
So if you see the cat, what are you going to do?
I don't know, try and stroke it.
I like to make it feel welcome on Rangitoto?
I like cats.
And we got recruiting. Can you help me find the cat on Rangitoto? Yeah?
Yeah.
So if you see it, can you let me know? Cat. Yeah. Yeah. Both cat sightings were near Islington Bay, which connects Rangitoto and Motatapu Islands. And those tourists we spoke to might find it kind of funny that we're here talking about a cat, but it's serious because cats eat our native birds and native insects. So the Department of Conservation has deployed specialty cat detector dogs, cat motion sensor cameras and cat tracking devices to try and hunt it down. And we've got treats.
What's new, pussycat? Whoa, whoa, whoa. What's new, pussycat? Whoa, whoa, whoa. Pussy.
Struggling, we called Doc for help.
Department of Conservation speaking with Erin.
I'm on Rangitoto Island at the moment and I'm really keen to help you guys find the cat. I'm just wondering, how can I help?
Don't try to grab it because then it may freak out and run away type thing, but if you just try keeping an eye on it.
Is there a reward?
Not to my knowledge.
What's new, pussycat? Whoa, whoa, whoa. What's new, pussycat? Whoa, whoa, whoa.
We've walked the hour to the summit of Rangitoto and asked everyone along the way if they've seen a cat, but nothing. Which means that the 2 reported sightings are either people getting confused and thinking they saw a cat but actually didn't, or this guy doesn't want to be found, which could prove a problem, a real problem for the Department of Conservation, given Rangitoto's been pest-free for more than 5 years now. Worst case scenario, for example, if it's a female cat that came over here pregnant, she could undo more than 2 decades worth of work.
I would try to catch it.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I see you've brought lots of equipment. Is it to find the cat?
No, I've heard about the cat, but I'm here to watch the birds.
Are you going to keep one eye to the ground though, just in case for the cat?
I see it, yeah. But I won't be trying to catch it.
Yeah. We were though, but having no luck.
We even trekked off the path, through dense bush, but still no sign of this cat.
You see any cats today?
No.
See a cat today?
No.
Do you see a cat today?
No. No, we didn't see any.
You see a cat today?
No.
Neither did Doc today, despite their fancy kit, no sign of the cat. And neither did we, despite our catnip, cat treats and toy and bells, so who's to say which method works best? Doc say they'll be back tomorrow to keep looking. For Checkpoint, Zach Fleming.
Coming up to 6 o'clock, lots of feedback tonight. Thank you all. Freedom camping on Evans Bay or other areas in Wellington should only be allowed when the Wellington City Council is willing to set up and maintain toilet blocks. Informally, area around Pukeahu War Memorial Park has become freedom parking area because of public toilets. Speaking of freedom camping and the increasing demands of the increasing number of tourists who are coming into New Zealand, we're going to look at tourism infrastructure tomorrow and at the areas with a very small number of ratepayers who have a very large number of tourists and simply can't sustain the demand for infrastructure that doesn't exist. So that's in a response to what we're looking at on Checkpoint tonight. Lots of people texted and emailed in, and we responded by making some calls today, and that will be on the program tomorrow night. Hi John, my name is Evan and I work on an island staff 24/7. Actually, I can't read that because we came out at 6 o'clock, but it's good feedback, so we'll bring it to you after the news.
RNZ News at 6. Kia ora, good afternoon. Ko Katrina Bat and tēnei. The government wants an early end to charter school contracts and could shut the schools down by the end of the year. The Education Minister, Chris Hipkins, says the Education Ministry will negotiate with the privately owned, publicly funded schools on a case-by-case basis. Our education correspondent John Gerritsen reports.
Today, the government introduced a bill to Parliament that stops the creation of new charter schools but allows the 11 existing schools to continue while they discuss options with the ministry. Chris Hipkins says the schools can apply to him to become a different type of school, such as a designated character school. But he says his preference is early termination of the contracts by mutual agreement. He says if agreement cannot be reached, he reserves the right to issue a notice of termination in May, which would take effect at the end of this school year. Ko John Gerritsen tēnei.
Police investigating the killing of Dunedin teenager Amber Rose Rush have found an item of interest. Officers found the item while searching in the Blackhead area, about 5 kilometres from the 16-year-old's home where she was found dead on Saturday morning. Police have not confirmed what the item is, but there are reports it's the teenager's cell phone. Detective Senior Sergeant Rob Hanna says police still want to hear from the occupants of a car parked at Blackhead Quarry about midnight on Friday. Mr Hanna says police also want to know about any sightings of a silver 2-door BMW, which is believed to have travelled from Dunedin to Balclutha in the early hours of Saturday morning. The Civil Defence Minister says last week's storm has done some major damage in the South Island's west coast and it may take some time for things to return to normal. In the Bulla district, 31 homes have been declared uninhabitable due to flooding brought on by ex-tropical cyclone Fehi. And State Highway 6 near Punakaiki is still down to one lane. The Civil Defence Minister, Chris Farfoy, visited communities on the coast today and met with the region's mayors to talk about what assistance they need. He says there are significant challenges to infrastructure. More than 60 people are still missing after yesterday's powerful earthquake near Taiwan's popular tourist city of Hualien as rescuers continue to comb the rubble. At least 7 people were killed in the quake, which caused 4 buildings to partially collapse. The ABC's Bill Birtles reports.
Since the 6.4 magnitude quake struck late on Tuesday night, rescue teams have brought more than 100 people to safety. Those still missing are believed to be mainly trapped in the floors of a collapsed apartment building. Emergency crews have used steel beams to prop up the 12-storey tower, which is leaning at an almost 45-degree angle. Complicating rescue efforts are aftershocks. Visitors from China, South Korea and Singapore are among the more than 200 people injured.
Bill Birtles. The likelihood of a tropical cyclone forming and hitting Fiji has been reduced from moderate to low, and it's still unclear whether the storm will affect New Zealand. The director of the Fiji Meteorological Service, Ravan Kumar, says while the winds look to be less severe, heavy rainfall is still expected to cause flooding tonight. In New Zealand, a heavy weather warning has been issued for Northland for tonight and tomorrow. The The top Democrat in the US House of Representatives has made history by delivering the longest ever address to the chamber. Nancy Pelosi, who turns 78 next month, spoke for 8 hours and 7 minutes without a break. She was speaking against a budget deal struck by Republicans and Democrats in the Senate to avert a government shutdown. She criticised the deal, saying it fails to give protection to the so-called Dreamers, the illegal immigrants who were brought to the US as children.
Every day, courageous, patriotic dreamers lose their status. Every day, the American dream slips further out of reach. As members of Congress, we have a moral responsibility to act now to protect dreamers who are the pride of our nation and are American in every way, but on paper.
Nancy Pelosi delivered her marathon speech wearing 4-inch heels and consuming nothing but water. Delays are expected on the Otira Highway in the Westland district after a serious crash 2 hours ago between Jacksons and Hohonu. The road is currently closed, but one lane is expected to be opened shortly. A Department of Conservation worker who has worked with Sirocco the kakapo says he must not have wanted to be found until now. Doc's star parrot was found this week, 2 years after his location transmitter failed. The 20-year-old kakapo shot to fame during the filming of a Stephen Fry documentary and became a travelling ambassador for his species. Doc's threatened species ambassador Nicola Toki says kakapo can't fly, but their feathers act as a perfect camouflage in the bush.
They essentially melt into the bush in front of you, in front of your very eyes. I've seen it happen, and if they don't want to be found, then they won't be found. They can hide up trees, they can hide under things, and it has been entirely up to Sirocco as to when he was going to make an appearance.
Nicola Toki says Sirocco has been a wonderful ambassador for conservation, and she hopes he'll soon get back into public life. It's 6:05. The cream of New Zealand sporting talent is gathering in Auckland tonight to celebrate their achievements of the past year at the Halberg Awards. There are 16 finalists in the sportsman, sportswoman, disabled sportsperson and team of the year categories, and they're all in line for the Supreme Award, as sports editor Stephen Hewson reports.
Last year's overall winner, kayaker Lisa Carrington, is in line for top honours again. She's a finalist in both the Sportswoman of the Year and Team of the Year. She won medals in all 4 of her events at the World Champs, including 2 gold. The only one who may push Carrington for Sportswoman of the Year is the Black Ferns' Portia Woodman, who was named World Rugby's Women's Player of the Year. World champion shot putter Tom Walsh and Formula One driver and Le Mans winner Brendan Hartley are up for Sportsman of the Year, along with World Rugby Men's Player of the Year Bowden Barrett and Black Cap Ross Taylor. The America's Cup winners, Team New Zealand, are the leading contenders in the Team of the Year category, while para swimmer Sophie Pascoe looks set to claim her 5th Disabled Sportsperson of the Year award. Lisa Carrington's coach, Gordon Walker, is a strong contender for Coach of the Year, along with the Black Ferns coach, Glenn Moore. This is Stephen Hewson.
The former All Black number 8, Gary Sear, has died after a long illness. He was 65. Sear played 12 tests for the All Blacks between 1976 and 1979 and will be remembered by many for kicking a 45-metre penalty in a test against France in Paris in 1977, which helped the All Blacks to a 15-3 win. That's the news.
I'm Catherine Ryan. On 9 to Noon today, New Zealand spends millions of dollars a year promoting marine safety in the Pacific. Is it making any difference? A new study finds many hunters eating wild game have unsafe exposure to toxic lead in their meat. Bringing Kiwi horror to the world stage with producer Whaling Owl. Music reviewer Grant Smithies with Auckland garage rock band D4. And a lighter look back at the week that was with comedians To Radar and Irene Pink. Join me on 9 to Noon on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow, Northland, Auckland and Coromandel Peninsula. Scattered rain becoming widespread in Northland this evening and spreading further south tonight and overnight with heavy falls. Waikato to Taranaki, including Bay of Plenty, the Central High Country, Gisborne and Hawke's Bay. Mostly fine today, however, a few showers about Gisborne and Hawke's Bay. Rain spreading south tomorrow morning and afternoon with possible heavy falls easing towards evening. Whanganui to Wellington and Wairarapa, mostly cloudy for Wairarapa, otherwise mainly fine, cloud increasing tomorrow with scattered rain developing late afternoon or evening. For Fiordland, fine at first, a few showers developing this evening. For the rest of the South Island, fine apart from areas of morning cloud and night. areas of cloud morning and night, isolated afternoon and evening showers about the ranges. And the Chatham Islands, cloudy periods, chance of a light shower tomorrow. It's 6:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thank you very much, Katrina Baden. I was so late returning then. You thought you were going to have to do the South Island again, didn't you?
Really, I was going to sit there and say what I'm going to do on my leave next week. I don't know.
What are you going to do on your leave next week?
Nothing.
Oh, nothing is nice.
Errands maybe, just
nice,
nothing.
Nice.
Yeah.
Thanks, Katrina. We have been in the Wairarapa region a bit tonight and we're going to head back there now to Tuturumuri School. Apologies for a bad dad joke, but what is this? Roll call at Tuturumuri. They've got no students, no roll call is required. They're still open though, hopefully southeast of Matambara in the southern Wairarapa, quite away from anywhere, including homes with children. So what happens in that situation? How long does a school sit empty before it closes? The Ministry is funding it still with an operations grant of $63,000 per annum, of which $19,000 has already been paid this year. The school thought they would have up to 6 children this year, but none came. So there's been community consultation meetings and the Ministry will advise the Minister in March. This is a bigger issue than one school though, as changes in land use and urbanisation see fewer and fewer children in some of our rural communities. But Katrina Casey, Deputy Secretary, Sector Enablement and Support at the Ministry of Education, says a school does really ideally need a pupil or two in order to survive.
Well, I think it is, as you pointed out, quite difficult to keep a school going when there aren't any students and if there is no prospect of definite enrolments, then we have to look seriously at giving the Minister advice on what the options are. And
what's your sense
one of those
about
options?
What's your sense about the prospect for imminent enrolments?
We're not seeing that that's likely at this point. But even if we were to advise the Minister that we think he should consider a proposal to close, there is still a process that needs to happen after that. So what we've been doing so far is pre any proposal to close. If the Minister agreed or thought that there should be such a proposal, then we would undertake further consultation, and that might allow a bit more time for the community to look at whether or not it was going to have enrolments at that school.
But that's a demographic thing. Either they have the children or they don't, right? I mean, children aren't going to bus in, are they, to Turumuri School? They're either in that community or they're not.
Yes, they would have to be in the vicinity of the school, and that's something that they've been looking at, and I understand that the community has been trying to generate quite a bit of interest from amongst its community. They'll also be looking at the youngsters that they've got coming through.
Have they got any coming through?
There are certainly some younger kids, but I think we would want to see from them, some certainty in what they thought was going to be the flow of enrolments. And even then, we still need to make it a call in the best interests of students, families, and of course the taxpayer. But at the end of the day, if there are no students at a school, then at times that decision just needs to be made.
I'm really fascinated by how hard it looks on the surface, like the Ministry has tried here. So if we look at the ERO report of 2011, and then again in 2013, because the 11 one was so bad that they did it 13-1 too, and that wasn't very good either. But between 13 and 15, real money was spent and effort was made. Significant areas were identified for review and development. I'm reading here from the 15 ERO report. The school went through a period of significant change. The principal and board members engaged in significant professional development and training. Teachers and students have been involved in design of a refurbished learning space conducive to 21st century learning. The principal continued to establish positive relationships with families and engage the community successfully in the life of the school. ERO was saying that in March 2015. 3 years later, it's empty. It's kind of weird, isn't it?
Certainly the school and its community did a magnificent job, as you point out, in those years. Parents have more choice these days about where they educate their children and what they expect for their children.
But if they exercise, sorry to interrupt, but if they, and this is the key point, isn't it? If they exercise this choice by sending their children elsewhere, don't they then forfeit the right to say, hey, we need a community school? Isn't, in fact, the most material thing they can do to keep that school going, send their children there?
That would be the advice we would give to every small community that has a declining role and needs to keep, wants to keep, values the school. So that's quite right. There is, from time to time, schools themselves come to us and say they just can't see any prospect of any more students over the next few years. And we would have closed 7 of those very small rural schools last year. So it happens from time to time, generally, and our preference is that the community comes to that decision themselves. And you might be familiar with the Linton Country School near Palmerston North.
We've spoken to them.
Which is one that we were considering towards the end of 2016 for closure, because last year we were expecting there not to be any children. The community did a tremendous job there, and as you've said, pretty much put their kids where their wishes were. And, as of the last roll return, they had 5 children. We won't know until 1st of March what their formal enrolments are for this year, but it can happen. The community can galvanise if it really wants to keep the school retained.
That's Katrina Casey from the Ministry of Education. Feedback on Freedom Campus. Every time we cover this story, people just flood us with stories like this. Travelling from Taupō to Napier last weekend, I stopped at 2 rest areas and found poos, toilet paper and rubbish at both of them. Disappointing. My partner suggested putting up signs in each rest area showing how far it is to the next toilet in both directions. Gosh, we get a lot of feedback like that from people travelling around the country. Let's go to Syria now, where activists say more than 30 civilians have been killed, including at least 12 children, as airstrikes by government forces continue on the last rebel-held area. More than 100 people have died in the Eastern Ghouta region in the past 2 days, according to the British-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights. The area is to the east of the capital, Damascus, and medical supplies and food have not been allowed in since late last year. The BBC's correspondent Quentin Somerville is, though, in Eastern Ghouta and has filed this report.
Syria's war isn't ending, it's getting worse. In Eastern Ghouta near Damascus, they're overwhelmed. Death comes daily from the skies. More than 150 civilians have been killed here this month already. The rescuers have to move fast. They follow the sound of a child crying. Then they reach for a scrap of cloth and pull hard. And a boy is removed alive from the rubble. Hundreds have been left injured in Eastern Ghouta, and in the last week, more than 40 children have been killed. Yesterday, rescue worker Saeed Al-Masri was called to an emergency. The baby in his arms is his own.
As we were approaching, I realized it was my house that had been hit. I heard a baby's cry and saw my son was wounded. I went inside and my children had been injured and my cousins too. My house was destroyed.
3-month-old Ibrahim is doing fine, but the family wonders when the next attack will come. Regime jets drop unguided bombs. They fall haphazardly and bring devastation. Rebel shelling has killed a dozen people in government areas. There's a new ferocity to the conflict. It should look different here. This is part of a de-escalation zone where suffering should be diminishing. But the opposite is happening. Here and elsewhere, the conflict is intensifying. Basic medical supplies are running low. The region is under siege. But there's also a sense of hopelessness, that the world has stopped caring.
We are completely drained. The roads are closed and we can't get new supplies. We've stopped believing that anyone will help us. We've given up on the international media and the UN. We hoped they would help us, but they've done nothing.
East Ghouta is nearing exhaustion. At least 31 people were killed today. The bombing has stopped for now, but everyone here knows that this new surge of bloodshed is far from over.
That's Quentin Somerville, filing from the besieged Syrian region of Eastern Ghouta. It's 90 minutes past 6. The annual celebration of New Zealand's sporting elite is on tonight with the 55th Hellberg Awards being held in Auckland. Awards for the country's best sportswoman, sportsman, disabled sportsperson, team, coach of the year 2017 are up for grabs before the evening culminates with the coveted Supreme Hellberg Award. RNZ sports reporter Clay Wilson is at Spark Arena in Auckland and he's beaming in there live. Clay, looking very handsome in your suit and tie. And Clay, I think actually you've got someone pretty special with you, haven't you?
Oh, I would say so, yeah. It's a nice occasion to get dressed up. I guess a who's who of New Zealand sports streaming in here, so they're all rolling in. And the red carpet behind me, as you can see, so all in all, I guess getting geared up for a pretty nice evening.
Who have you got? Have you got a guest with you there, Clay? Have you got, or am I just making this up?
No, I certainly do. I'm joined by double Olympic champion canoe racer Lisa Carrington. Lisa's been kind enough to give us a couple of minutes of time. Thanks for joining us, Lisa.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me.
I guess it's a bit different from day-to-day life for you coming to an awards night like this. So what do you enjoy most about coming along to this awards night?
Probably dressing up. Like, we don't get to do this often, and also just celebrating sport and getting to see faces that we don't often see through the year. And yeah, it's a really cool time and everyone enjoys it. So yeah, so I love it.
You obviously won the Supreme Award last year. What did that mean to you to win an award like that?
Yeah, I think it was really special. I think the best part was the names that the people who had received that trophy in the past, like 50 years. So it was really special to receive that alongside them and have my name on that trophy.
Yeah. Obviously, most of the categories are pretty hotly contested, but the sportswoman category this year looks like you've got some pretty good rivals there for that award.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's fantastic to see how amazing New Zealand sportswomen have been performing nationally and internationally. So I think it's fantastic to have rugby, those Portia there, and I think it's really cool to have such strong women.
Yeah, obviously it's been a big year for you last year. We haven't seen you since August, so since that World Champs, those gold medals and I guess a bronze as well, what have you been up to? What have you been doing with your time?
Yeah, so I mean it's just like onwards and upwards, and I think it's building into the Olympics. I mean we're a few years away, but you kind of just keep building and year on year. So since then, just had a bit of a break and just got straight back into it, and just getting those laying those foundations to keep pushing through to Tokyo.
So what has 2018 got in store for Lisa Carrington in terms of training competition? What have you got your eye on?
Yeah, so we've actually got our national champs in a few weeks, which it coincides with our selection. So, there it's really important for us to race really well and make the team, whether it's in K1 or team boats. And I guess that's something that I really want to do, is really be a part of the wider team, because we've got so many amazing athletes and kayakers that we can perform really well on the world stage, and that's what we want to do. So we've got that in a few weeks, and we've got World Cups in May and then World Champs in August. So yeah, it's a full-on year, but I mean pretty excited for it.
You mentioned there about the team boats. It's obviously something you've been focusing on more. So what are you enjoying about that? Has that been different after being solo, I guess, for quite a long time?
Yeah, I mean, I found it fantastic. The environment you get when you train with the girls, and also racing and having that support, is fantastic. And being able to support others is also an amazing thing to be able to do, and see others reach their potential and keep learning and growing. So yeah, I think it's such an amazing thing for me to be able to do. I don't know if everyone gets to watch and help others perform at their best. So yeah.
And just finally, I guess you've done a lot, you've had a lot of success, 2 Olympic gold medals and the rest.
Yeah.
What motivates you to keep pushing, I guess, in this sport and to more and more success?
I think it's just so challenging to be, for me, to be a sports person and then, to perform at my best individually and keep doing that, but also be able to do it with others. I think that's what's really challenging, and I guess that's why I do it. And I think it's so amazing to be able to share that experience with other paddlers and other people.
Brilliant. Well, we really appreciate your time. Hope you have a nice night and all the best for the awards.
Cool. Thank you very much. Cheers.
That's all from us down here. Back to you in the studio, John.
Chloe, thank you so much. Every time I hear Lisa Carrington speak, she inspires me by not only being an outstanding athlete, 2 Olympic gold medals, but just by being an absolutely fantastic person. Clay Wilson with Lisa Carrington at the Hellbergs. Auckland Council's latest attempt to stem the spread of Cody dieback is being criticised as fiddling around the edges while the disease rampages through the Waitakere Ranges. Council teams have been injecting phosphate into diseased trees near Piha in an attempt to save them, but the critics say if really wanted to save the Cody from extinction, the answer is quite simple: keep people out of the Waitakeres. Ryan Quinn reports.
Phosphate's a promising treatment that's shown dramatic results in trials over the past 5 years. A plant pathologist for plant and food research and a pioneering scientist in the trials, Ian Horner, says it's the only treatment that's had any effect on Cody dieback.
We've been treating trees that are already showing symptoms of Cody dieback, in some cases quite advanced symptoms with these big bleeding lesions at the base of the trees. And we found that when we injected them with the phosphate, the lesions stopped spreading, dried up, and in many cases healed and peeled back.
But Dr. Horner's the first to clarify that phosphate is no cure. It can, in the short term at least, save individual trees, but it doesn't kill the disease in soil, meaning trees can get reinfected and the spores keep spreading. Mels Barton, a spokeswoman for the Tree Council, which is fighting to save Cody in the Waitakeres, says the Auckland Council isn't acting fast enough.
They are fiddling while Rome burns, and that what they're trying to do is make it look like they're doing something while not actually doing what they need to do. They need to use a restricted place notice to close the Waitakere Ranges. They need to do it now.
The council had the chance in December to vote to close the Waitakeres to the public, but opted instead to close a few more tracks. An iwi imposed rahuis not stopping people going in, and in a blunder this week, a PR company for the council encouraged people to head out there on Waitangi Day. Scientist and Cody dieback expert Nick Waipara says keeping people out of the forest is the best shot Cody have to survive. 70% of infected trees are near walking tracks.
The rahui that Te Kawerau Maki have put in place is the ultimate, actually. No one goes in or out till this is sorted. Upgrading tracks, closing tracks, trying to get people to clean their shoes has pros and cons, but generally it hasn't been working.
But the council's biosecurity manager, Phil Brown, says just because phosphate injections are not a cure, it doesn't mean they're not worth doing.
Ideally, we'd have a cure that protects every Cody and every Cody tree and every Cody seedling. We don't have that yet, but what we do have is apparently a tool that can stop those trees from dying, at least in the short term, and so that does buy us a bit of time.
And the scientist who pioneered phosphate research, Ian Horner, says for those trees at least, injections are their only hope.
By going in there and treating, they're at least giving those stands a little bit of a reprieve. I think the alternative is just to sit there and watch the forest die around us.
The council says if Aucklanders want to do more and spend more on Cody dieback, they should have their say when consultation on the 10-year budget opens at the end of the month. I Tamaki Makoto, ko Rowan Quinn, DNA.
6:27, the Green MP, Julianne Ginter, has delivered a blunt assessment of her party's election result as she launches her bid to become the party's next female co-leader. With nominations due to close tomorrow, she and fellow MP Marama Davidson are so far the only two to put forward their names for the position vacated by Materia Ture just before last year's general election. Ms Ginter announced her candidacy in front of Parliament this morning, telling reporters that she could be a strong voice for the party.
Having Green ministers outside Cabinet means that we do have the freedom to stand up for Green Party values and policies when we disagree with the government. And under my co-leadership, I want there to be no doubt that the Green Party will not be pushed around or taken for granted. That I will not hesitate to stand up and disagree when we have points of disagreement with the government. But I also want to emphasize to all Green Party members and supporters that we will be constructive partners in government, that we will enact the good green change that they have voted for us to achieve. I absolutely believe that we can recover from our last election result.
Julianne Genter was asked about the Green Party and how it handled the controversy around the former co-leader Materia Ture and her admission of benefit fraud in the weeks leading up to the election campaign.
I think that we took a very bold policy with a bold personal story to the electorate, but many voters didn't hear the message that we were trying to get out. And I think that was ultimately the weakness. I think it was the right policy. I think it was incredibly brave for Materia to share her personal story, but I don't think that enough voters actually heard the message that she was delivering.
So do you think the story overrode the policy in a way, because who was talking about the Greens benefit policy?
I think that we need to be incredibly careful and brave, but we have to manage the risks whenever we're communicating, and we need to be realistic about our ability to communicate with hundreds of thousands of voters or millions of voters.
So do you not think the risks were managed in that situation?
I think we would all agree that risks could have been managed better.
Julianne Genter. That ends Checkpoint for tonight. Just before we go, so much feedback coming in on special needs education, or the lack of it, the lack of support for children with special needs, particularly serious special needs in our schools. Parents who've been contacting us with your stories, we're going to give you a call if you don't mind tomorrow. You don't have to talk to us, but we'll call you to discuss whether you want to us. Pam, I'll call you myself tomorrow. We really look forward to talking to you. Thanks for being in touch. We're very grateful for your trust in us. That is Checkpoint for tonight. Have a wonderful evening. We'll be back tomorrow at 5.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Police investigating the killing of Dunedin teenager Amber Rose Rush have found an item of interest. The National Party says the government is being nasty and vindictive by moving to close charter schools. Health experts want better labelling on products after Lewis Road Creamery had to recall its breakfast drinks over their sugar content. A police officer has suffered facial injuries while arresting a man in central Dunedin this afternoon. And a heavy weather warning has been issued for Northland for tonight and tomorrow. Our next news and weather is at 7.
This Saturday morning, Sean Bithell runs the biggest second-hand bookshop in Scotland, and he is a famous grouse. Turns out that he is in fact adorable. Helen Dorenstein is a buffalo pioneer. Sculptor Max Passe, whose work Reflection graces both the Wellington and London waterfronts. And Professor Jeff